Was your place in your family chosen by chance? Or is there a much deeper spiritual purpose behind it, a plan laid out before you were even born? This simple yet perplexing question already opens the door to one of the most powerful teachings revealed by Emmanuel, the spirit that guided Chico Xavier throughout his mediumistic mission. According to him, no family tie is accidental, and the role that each of us plays within the home is a direct result of choices made in other lives. Under the greater law of Karmic, the reincarnation. Think for a moment, why were you born exactly where you were? Why do you have this father, this mother, these siblings? Why do some family relationships seem harmonious, while others become testing grounds and challenges? Emmanuel explains that within the family structure lie the greatest opportunities for spiritual learning. Each position, whether that of the eldest child, who carries the weight of responsibility, that of the youngest, who brings lightness and joy, or that of the middle sibling, always seeking balance, represents a karmic task carefully adjusted to the evolutionary needs of each spirit. And this is where his message becomes even more profound. When you understand your place in the family, you begin to see conflicts from a different perspective. Pain no longer seems unfair. Friction, instead of punishment, reveals itself. Growth Instruments Emmanuel teaches that home is the first stage of our spiritual transformation. A small universe where love and forgiveness are put to the test day after day. It's no wonder he said that the family is the workshop where the spirit shapes its own destiny. But what's truly striking is how these revelations speak to modern life. At a time when so many families are falling apart and bonds seem fragile, Emmanuel emerges as a timeless voice, reminding us that spirit chooses the cradle where it can rebalance its debts, heal old wounds, and reconnect with hearts with which it has eternal bonds. Sometimes that demanding father, that distant mother, that difficult brother are not obstacles in your path. They are a spiritual bridge for your inner improvement. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt like certain family relationships seem to repeat the same pattern, as if history insisted on starting over? Well, maybe it's not just a coincidence. Emmanuel reveals that families are formed by reunions of old souls, united by a commitment to evolve together. No one is in your life by chance, and certainly not in your home. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Behind every role you play, there is a silent story written centuries ago between you and those who share your blood. Stories of love, forgiveness, mistakes, and reconciliations. Stories that span time and are renewed with each new existence. Stay with me until the end, because in the following reflections you will understand how Emmanuel deciphers these invisible bonds, on how your place in the family reveals not only what you are experiencing now, but what your spirit has been trying to heal for many lifetimes. Perhaps, by understanding this, you'll never look at your family the same way again. Because according to Emmanuel, the home you were born into isn't a coincidence. It's the exact reflection of what your soul needs to evolve. And it's from this revelation that we begin to uncover the true spiritual secret hidden in your place in the family, a secret that connects the past, present, and future of your spiritual journey. Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to have entered your life only to challenge you? Why are some family ties so intense, so difficult and yet so impossible to break? Emmanuel, the spirit who guided Chico Xavier in so many works of wisdom, states that families are not formed only by blood ties, but by reunions of old souls, united by the need for reconciliation, forgiveness, and mutual learning. What seems like chance is actually a carefully planned encounter long before birth, and the home you live in today, could be the stage for a reunion that began centuries ago. Think about it. Maybe that father you've never been able to get along with, that mother who seems distant, that brother you're always at odds with. Maybe they're all spirits who've walked alongside you in other lives. Emmanuel reveals that strongest spiritual connections are often the most challenging, because it is in them that the spirit finds the chance to transform what was once hatred into understanding, what was once guilt into love. Home, he says, is the first temple of our spiritual awakening. It is there that the soul is tested, healed, and polished. Imagine two spirits who, in a past life, were deeply wounded, Perhaps one betrayed the other, caused pain, harbored resentment. Upon returning to Earth, they meet again, but no longer as enemies. This time, they return as father and son. Love now needs to replace resentment. And in daily life, old wounds begin to heal. What was once a battlefield becomes a space for reconciliation. Emmanuel explains that God, in his infinite wisdom, transforms family life into a laboratory of the soul, where the spirit learns, through pain and affection, the true meaning of unconditional love. Have you ever experienced this? That bond that challenges you, but for some reason you can't let go. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover could completely change the way you see your own family. Emmanuel reminds us that no one is in our lives by chance. Every family relationship is a carefully tailored spiritual opportunity, a scheduled reunion between spirits who still have something to resolve, something to learn, something to forgive. And that's why sometimes the greatest tests don't happen at work or on the streets, but at home. In the look of a relative that bothers you, in the words that hurt, in the silences that sting. Emmanuel says, "That house where you were born is the setting for your karmic rescue, the space where old debts find the chance to be settled through coexistence, patience, and love." It invites us to see each family conflict not as a punishment, but as a call to healing. What if that difficult relative who always seems to test you is the spirit you promised to help before reincarnating? What if the suffering within your home is actually destiny's way of teaching you to love more deeply and detachedly? Emmanuel explains that swells meet again and again until they learn the lesson that unites them sometimes. The same cycle of pain repeats itself from generation to generation, not by curse, but by life's insistence on teaching us what we do not yet understand. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Because, according to Emmanuel, there is no chance in human relationships. Every reunion has a reason. Every bond has a purpose. Family, even imperfect, is the sacred ground where the soul grows. And perhaps when you begin to see your story in this spiritual light, you'll realize that the greatest conflicts in your life are actually the greatest invitations to forgiveness and love. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. How these invisible bonds shape our destiny, and how Emmanuel's messages can help us understand the true role of the family as a path to redemption and spiritual awakening. Have you ever stopped to think why certain situations repeat themselves in your life? As if fate insisted on placing you before the same challenges? What if every family difficulty, every disagreement, every burdensome bond were not a punishment, but a spiritual calling for your growth? Emmanuel, the spirit who guided Chico Xavier in so many messages of light, teaches that karma is not punishment, but learning he is the invisible force that guides us toward balance, that transforms mistakes into lessons and pain into wisdom. Nothing in the plot of your life is there by chance, not even the role you occupy within your family. According to Emmanuel, each family position brings with it a specific spiritual task, being a father. Mother, son, brother, or sister is not just a biological or social function, but a role carefully chosen by the spirit before reincarnation. Each of these roles is an experience shaped to teach virtues we have not yet mastered. A father, for example, learns the forgiveness through sacrifice, by giving up herself to protect and provide. The mother often learns the unconditional love by welcoming, caring for, and silently bearing the weight of responsibility. The child, in turn, exercises the humility depending by recognizing that he needs to learn before teaching. And the brother learns empathy, the art of sharing, of giving in, of understanding the other as an extension of oneself. Have you ever experienced this? That feeling that a difficult situation is trying to teach you something? Maybe that recurring conflict with a family member isn't just a coincidence. Emmanuel explains that life's trials repeat themselves until we understand the lesson they hide. Karma is not a punishment from outside. It is a loving reflection of the choices the spirit made in the past. An invitation to transformation? The universe, guided by divine laws, returns to each of us the experiences necessary to heal the imperfections we still carry within our souls. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because, according to Emmanuel, in the family, the spirit finds the mirror of its own shadows and the divine chance to transform them into light. This means that the relationships that challenge you most are actually the ones that most reveal who you are. What you judge, reject, or fear in someone close to you may be exactly what you need to understand and heal within yourself. Karma, when viewed consciously, ceases to be a burden and becomes a gift, a path of evolution, precisely designed by invisible hands, guided by divine love. Stay with me until the end, because this reflection can change the way you see every connection in your life. Emmanuel invites us to look at karma with gratitude, not fear. He reminds us that pain has a purpose, and love is always the final destination. Everything we experience within the family, the disagreements, the silences, the disappointments, is part of a spiritual journey that seeks to teach us balance. Sometimes, the spirit that hurts you today is the same one you once hurt, and this reunion is an opportunity to rescue, understand, and rewrite this story. In the light of love, perhaps your biggest family challenges, actually, our greatest opportunity for spiritual evolution, and perhaps the karma you fear is just a reflection of divine love in action, inviting you to mature, forgive, understand, and grow. Because, in the end, Emmanuel teaches us that every role we play is a lesson and progress in that life generously. Always gives us new opportunities to learn. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. How to recognize these signs of learning that karma brings, and how to transform the weight of trials into spiritual wisdom that frees the soul. Have you ever felt that the more the world progresses, the more people grow apart? That families, once united by affection and presence, now seem connected only by screens and silence? Emmanuel, a spirit of profound wisdom, who guided Chico Xavier in so many timeless lessons, warned of this decades ago. According to him, the spiritual evolution of humanity does not depend on great technological discoveries, but on the ability of human beings to rediscover love within their own homes. And that's exactly why his messages remain so alive, perhaps. Even more necessary than ever, we live in an era where immediacy has replaced dialogue, selfishness has stifled empathy, and pride has replaced listening. Families, which should be havens of understanding, have often become battlefields. Parents and children who don't understand each other, siblings who grow apart due to old hurts, couples who share the same roof but not the same heart. Emmanuel invites us to look at this reality with different eyes, the eyes of the spirit. For him, the family is the laboratory of the soul, and every relationship, no matter how difficult it may seem, is a divine opportunity for learning and healing. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that the true challenge of life is not out there, but within your own home? Emmanuel teaches that families are groups of spirits under reconstruction, brought together not by chance, but by necessity. Every gesture of patience, every silent forgiveness, every attempt at understanding is a step toward the light. And when one member awakens to this awareness, the entire group benefits. That's why he asserted that understanding the spiritual role within the family is an act of collective healing, because when a heart chooses to forgive, an entire lineage begins to free itself from old karmic chains. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Emmanuel's words, even written in a time of less noise and more simplicity, seem to have been made for today's world. He knew that humanity would move toward speed, but lose depth, that it would draw closer virtually, but grow further apart emotionally. And so he left the most important reminder: spirituality is not lived in temples or churches, but in the small actions of everyday life, in the respect, listening, and love that we can cultivate at home. Stay with me until the end, because this reflection can change the way you see your home and the people who live in it. Emmanuel explains that don't need perfect families, but hearts willing to love and forgive. True spiritual progress lies not in being right, but in understanding others. Not in winning arguments, but in silencing pride and listening with the soul. When the spirit awakens to this, the home, even full of imperfections, becomes a sanctuary. Think for a moment. What if the reason you are in this family, at this time, and with these people, is precisely to learn to love in a more conscious way? Emmanuel said that tests of coexistence are bridges, not prisons, and when we choose to look at them with gratitude, everything changes. Pain becomes learning, difference becomes opportunity, and home becomes a space for growth again. We live in a time when the world demands haste, but the spirit demands pause. Emmanuel reminds us that true evolution lies not in accumulating, but in understanding, not in conquering, but in serving. And perhaps the first place this transformation needs to happen is within our own homes, because, in the end, Emmanuel's great message for today is simple and powerful. Spirituality begins where love is most challenged, within the home, and it is precisely about how to apply this ancient wisdom to modern life that we are going to talk about next. And perhaps it is precisely at this point that Emmanuel's message becomes more necessary than ever, when the human heart, tired of so much noise, begins to seek silence and meaning. When we realize that we don't need to change the whole world at once, but unlike the way we treat those inside our own home, because it is there, between simple gestures and unspoken words, that true spirituality reveals itself. Emmanuel said that love is like light. The more you share it, the stronger it becomes, and it is in this spirit of sharing that I want to invite you to be part of this conversation. If this topic made sense to you, if any part of this reflection touched your heart or made you think about your own family, leave here in the comments what struck you most. I read each message with care, because it is through them that we understand how much these words still resonate in the real lives of those on the other side of the screen. Your participation here is what keeps this chain of learning and inspiration alive. When you like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's not just a gesture of support, it's a way to spread that light to others who are also searching for understanding, comfort, and purpose. Every like helps this message reach someone who may be going through a difficult time, someone who needs to hear this right now. So if you feel these reflections have value, press the like button and subscribe to the channel. This way you can continue following each new message, each new spiritual story that brings a little piece of wisdom to our daily lives. Here, the idea is to build together a community of souls seeking to evolve with empathy, love, and awareness. And while you leave your comment and share your feelings, let's continue together, because what comes next will deepen this journey even further. Emmanuel has much more to teach us about how bringing spirituality into modern life, and how, even in the midst of the world's chaos, it is still possible to transform the home into a sacred space of healing and reconciliation. Was your place in your family chosen by chance? Or is it part of a much larger spiritual plan drawn up long before you were born? This is a question that, at first glance, may seem merely philosophical, but according to Emmanuel, one of the greatest spiritual mentors who ever communicated through Chico Xavier, the answer is deeply connected to your life purpose. Your trials and the journey of your spirit, Emmanuel said, there are no coincidences when it comes to family ties. Everything is a learning experience. Everything is a construction. Everything has a reason that transcends time and matter. When we look at the family, we usually only see social roles: father, mother, children, siblings. But Emmanuel invites us to see the spiritual backstage, bend these roles. He reveals that each position within the family is a meeting point between souls that have ancient histories, commitments made in other existences, and missions that continue to intertwine. It is in this intertwining that the true challenge of evolution lies. Consider, for example, the eldest son. He often feels an invisible weight on his shoulders, as if destiny demands more maturity, more responsibility, more strength. Emmanuel explains that this is no coincidence. Spirits who take on this role typically carry it within themselves. The impulse to repair, guide, or protect, as if balancing mistakes from previous lives in which they may have failed in this duty. The firstborn, in the spiritual view, carries not only the family name, but also part of your collective karma, serving as a link between the past and the future. The youngest, on the other hand, usually arrives with a lighter energy, a quicker smile, and a gift for breaking tension and lightening the mood. According to Emmanuel, he is the messenger of renewal, the one who brings joy to weary hearts, who reopens paths of affection where there was once distance. It is the spirit who, in many incarnations, was the conciliator, the one who tries to unite what pride separated. And even though it may seem fragile, it is often the one who sustains the harmony of the home with its innocence and sensitivity. And the middle brother. He usually lives a silent journey. He observes the older and the younger, unsure of where he fits in. And it is precisely in this apparent nowhere that Emmanuel sees one of the greatest spiritual tests. The middle brother is the seeker of balance. It's the one who needs to find it. One's own identity in the midst of opposing forces. Learning to assert oneself without competing and to love without measuring. It is the symbol of transition, of adaptation, of evolution in motion. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because if we go beyond the labels and look with the eyes of the soul, we begin to realize the every blood tie is actually a tie of destiny. Emmanuel said that no one is born into the wrong family. Even the most difficult relationships, those marked by disagreements, distances, or old pains, have a hidden spiritual purpose. Sometimes the soul chooses to be reborn alongside someone with whom it has had conflicts in the past, precisely to learn forgiveness, compassion, or simply to end cycles that have lasted centuries. This vision changes everything, because instead of seeing family as a burden, we begin to see it as a sacred field of spiritual transformation. Every experience is a practical lesson in evolution, and every challenge is a mirror that shows us where we still need to grow. Emmanuel said that Earth is a school, and home is the first classroom. And if we stop and think about it, it makes perfect sense. It's at home that we learn patience, limits, and unconditional love. But there is a hidden truth that many prefer not to face, that pain is also a teaching tool. Sometimes it is through loss, conflict, and silence that the spirit matures. Emmanuel said, "At that most painful bonds are those that free us the most, because they force the ego to fall apart and love to rebuild itself on another level. And when this happens, the family stops being just a group of people living under the same roof and becomes a circle of souls on a joint mission. And if you observe closely, you'll realize that the universe repeats patterns until you understand them. That kind of relationship that bothers you. The authoritarian figure, the competitive sibling, the absent relative, all of these are part of a spiritual script that seeks the same end, the awakening of consciousness. Because Emmanuel said that evolution does not happen in isolation, but in coexistence, is through living together that we learn to tolerate. Listen, respect, and, above all, forgive. This journey of self-discovery within one's own family is, in fact, a gateway to something much greater. It forces us to ask ourselves, who am I in this story? What role have I chosen to play? And what do I still need to heal within myself to break cycles that have been repeating themselves for so long? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are where transformation lies. Because when you begin to see your place in the family as part of a spiritual purpose, everything changes. Hurts lose their weight, demands give way to empathy. And love, even imperfect love, becomes enough. And perhaps this is Emmanuel's greatest teaching. It's not about changing others. It's about transforming yourself through them. Family is the clearest mirror of your own spirit. It's where pride is tested, where humility is learned, and where true love is put to the test. Every reunion is a chance to rewrite history. Every disagreement is an invitation to understanding. And every gesture of affection, no matter how small, has the power to heal wounds that may have begun centuries ago. After all, we are all part of the same cosmic machine, learning sometimes through pain, sometimes through tenderness, to reconnect with what is most divine within us. And understanding the spiritual role we play within our family is like turning on a light behind the scenes of our own soul. A light that reveals not only what we were, but what we can still become. Comment here, that makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding our role within the family is only the first step. The real mystery begins when we understand that family ties go far beyond flesh, blood, and chance. Emmanuel said that families are formed behind the scenes of the spirit long before any birth takes place, as part of a collective learning project, in which souls reunite to repair, forgive, and evolve together. And when you look through this prism, everything changes. Home ceases to be just the setting of your childhood and becomes the stage for a great spiritual journey, where every gesture, every disagreement, and even every silence carries a profound purpose, according to Emmanuel. No family is an accidental grouping. There's no such thing as coincidence when it comes to spiritual destiny. What exists are reunions planned with divine precision. Spirits who once wounded each other now return side by side with new opportunities for healing. Sometimes that demanding father you never managed to please is the same spirit you disappointed in another life. Sometimes that sibling who seems to compete with you in everything is the same one who, centuries ago, fought with you for something you both lost: love. And other times, that relative who causes you pain is actually the most faithful mirror of what still needs to be transformed within you, Emmanuel used to say. The house where you were born is the first temple of your spiritual awakening. And when we stop to think, this phrase reveals a hidden truth about our journey. Home is the space where the soul begins its exercise of love, where masks fall, where the oldest traces of our essence are revealed. It is there that we learn, sometimes by force, to forgive, to understand, to respect, and to set aside pride. Family is the proving ground of evolution. It is there that the spirit is honed, and each difficult relationship is a divine tool shaping our consciousness. There's a symbolic story told in spiritual circles inspired by Emmanuel's lessons. It tells of two spirits who, in a past life, were implacable enemies. One had betrayed the other, causing profound suffering. Both passed away with wounded hearts, carrying resentments that time had not healed. When they returned to the spiritual plane, they understood that hatred was keeping them trapped, and they promised each other that in the next existence, they would make peace. And so it was. They returned to Earth, but no longer as rivals. They were reborn as father and son. The love that had once been distorted by pain now had a chance to rebuild itself. But of course, nothing is simple. The son grew up rebellious, defiant, full of inexplicable hurts. The impatient father felt a strange mixture of anger and affection for the young man who so provoked him. Neither of them remembered their previous lives, but the pent-up emotion still vibrated within them. And it was through their time together, their conflicts, their tears, and their gestures of forgiveness, that little by little they both began to free themselves. The story ends without great miracles, without perfect reconciliations, but with something far more valuable: the beginning of understanding. This parable reflects what Emmanuel called karmic rescue, a process in which love returns to occupy the place once occupied by guilt and pain. It's life's perfect mechanism for balancing what was once unbalanced. So when you look at someone in your family and feel anger, frustration, or injustice, perhaps what you're feeling isn't just emotion, it could be spiritual memory, echo of ancient stories that are still calling for reconciliation. And that's where the true power of awareness comes in. When you begin to see your relationships as opportunities for healing rather than punishment, something within you shifts. You begin to free yourself from the victim position and take on the role of learner. And that's a powerful mindset shift. Because deep down, spiritual evolution is less about what happens to you and more about how you react to what happens. Emmanuel said that forgiveness is the greatest act of intelligence of the soul, because it breaks invisible chains that bind us to the past. How often do we feel trapped in emotional repetition? That the same fights, the same pain, and the same roles repeat themselves generation after generation. This happens because the energy of unresolved feelings perpetuates itself until someone has the courage to break the cycle. And that someone could be you. Perhaps your mission in this life is precisely to break a pattern that spans centuries. Perhaps your spiritual task is to be the first person in your lineage to choose love over revenge, dialogue over silence, Forgiveness over pride. These seemingly small internal decisions have a gigantic impact on your energy field and that of your entire family. When you change your posture, the entire dynamic around you begins to transform. And this isn't poetry, it's vibration. Emmanuel said that vibrations of the home are shaped by the spiritual state of those who inhabit it, and that when a heart awakens to love, it becomes a point of light capable of illuminating all others. But, of course, awakening comes at a price. Seeing relationships with greater awareness requires emotional maturity, requires the courage to look at one's own shadows. And it's not always comfortable to realize that what irritates us most in others is precisely a reflection of what we still need to heal within ourselves. The hidden truth is that family life is a relentless mirror, showing us our limits, our fears, and our weaknesses. However, it is also the most divine of opportunities, because it is in this mirror that we learn to love the imperfect, and it is through this love that the soul is transformed. Now, imagine the impact of understanding that your home is, in fact, your spirit's training ground, that those arguments, those differences, those seemingly pointless pains are lessons meticulously crafted by life's wisdom. And when you accept this, resentment begins to dissolve. Hurt ceases to be a prison and becomes a portal. Because true forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the need to continue carrying the burden. This is the silent beauty of karma. It doesn't punish, it teaches. And within the family, this learning happens in practice, in looks, words, and gestures. The home is the soul's laboratory. It is where the spirit puts into action everything it has learned in theory, and where it discovers what it still needs to learn. Emmanuel compared reincarnation to a grand spiritual theater, where the same souls return with new roles, new costumes, and new plots, but always with the same objective: prove love. And perhaps this is the greatest revelation of all. No one is on your path by mistake. Every person in your family, no matter how difficult, is part of your evolutionary story. You may not have consciously chosen to be with them in this life, but your spirit did. And this choice was not made out of punishment, but out of love, the love that desires to understand, redeem, and transform. Because ultimately, it's through coexistence with others that the soul recognizes itself. It's by facing differences that it matures. And it's through forgiveness that it finally frees itself. Write it down. I'm on that journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because understanding that the family is the stage for spiritual reunion is just the beginning. The real challenge begins when you realize that the role you occupy within it, whether as father, mother, son, daughter, brother, or sister, carries within it a set of lessons carefully chosen by your own spirit before reincarnation. Emmanuel explained that karma is not a punishment, but a balancing mechanism. A kind of loving justice that returns to the soul exactly the experiences it needs to improve. And that's why life often seems to place us in difficult roles, not to punish us, but to educate us spiritually, according to Emmanuel. Karma is the divine echo of our own decisions, what we emit in thought, word, or deed one day returns, not to hurt us, but to show us the impact of our choices. Within the family, this return manifests itself through the closest relationships, because it is there that the soul bears itself, without masks, without appearances, without disguises. It is through coexistence that we learn about ourselves, and that is why family is the most precise laboratory of spiritual self-knowledge. Consider, for example, the father who spends his life struggling to support his children, giving up on himself, learning, often without realizing it, the deeper meaning of forgiveness. Perhaps, in another life, he was someone who abused his power, who didn't know how to care, who failed in his responsibility. Now, life invites him to balance what was once excessive. Through sacrifice, he finds the chance to heal selfishness and awaken the love that serves. Emmanuel said, in the family, the spirit finds the mirror of its own shadows and the divine chance to transform them into light. Likewise, a child who grows up facing challenges, feeling dependent or misunderstood, may be learning the lesson of humility. In other lives, They may have been someone who despised those most vulnerable, and now they need to experience vulnerability to develop compassion. It is in this role that they understand and practice that no soul is superior to another. The sibling, on the other hand, who shares, competes, yields, and learns to coexist, constantly practices empathy. They discover that love is not just a feeling, but an attitude, and that true growth happens when we stop trying to defeat others and start growing with them. These roles may seem commonplace, but they conceal a hidden truth about the soul's journey. Emmanuel reminds us that we don't choose our families to be happy, we choose them to evolve. Happiness comes as a consequence when the lesson is understood. Therefore, when you find yourself in the midst of family conflicts, perhaps what's happening isn't a punishment, but an opportunity. A silent invitation to mature emotionally, to transform pain into wisdom, to develop a new mindset toward human relationships. But of course, learning doesn't always come smoothly. Sometimes it comes in the form of loss, rejection, disappointment, or estrangement. The uncommunicative father, the controlling mother, the estranged sibling, the rebellious child, these roles are part of a spiritual machine that, though seemingly out of sync, works in perfect harmony under divine law. Emmanuel used to say that the souls that challenge us most are, in fact, those that love us most, because they accept the role of bringing about our transformation. They force us to look at what's most hidden within us: pride, fear, guilt, lack, and invite us to overcome. This perspective changes everything. When you understand karma from this perspective, suffering ceases to be just pain and becomes a process of refinement. Each conflict becomes a tool, each disagreement a lesson, each hurt a mirror. Emmanuel compared family life to a great school of souls where time is the teacher, and each challenge is a subject that cannot be skipped. If you haven't learned it yet, it will return and return, till the learning is absorbed with the heart. It is at this point that true inner transformation arises. Because when you accept responsibility for your role and understand that it was chosen out of love, a chance, the weight begins to lift. Resentment dissolves, and the victim's role gives way to that of the apprentice. This is the difference between living karma unconsciously and living karma consciously. In the first case, you repeat patterns, hurt yourself, and blame others. In the second, you awaken and begin to rewrite the plot of your own story. The truth is that every difficult relationship brings a hidden gift. Sometimes the gift is patience. Sometimes it's forgiveness. Other times, it's the ability to let go. Emmanuel said that pain is God's scalpel, which cuts only where healing is needed. And when we look at our relationships through this spiritual lens, we begin to see that nothing we experience is a loss, it's always preparation. Each lesson learned opens the way for a new level of consciousness. For a more mature, more lucid, more detached love, many believe that karma is divine punishment, a way to pay for past mistakes. Emmanuel teaches us the opposite. Karma is an opportunity to growth, and repair. It's the law of love acting silently. The universe doesn't desire punishment, it desires balance. And that's why karma always places us in the right situation so we can experience the other side of our actions. When you cause pain, you return to feel the pain. When you cause love, you return to multiply the love. With each experience, the soul adjusts, refines, and approaches divine harmony. But it's important to remember karma isn't something that binds us. It's something that frees us. It's the invisible thread that guides the soul to the exact point it needs to be to learn what it hasn't yet understood. Emmanuel explained that karma is like a spiritual compass. It doesn't punish us. It simply redirects us. And within the family, this compass is especially accurate, because it's in the company of those closest to us that the truth about who we truly are emerges. Think for a moment. How many times have you tried to change someone else and realized the real work was changing yourself? How many times have you believed the problem was outside, but discovered that what needed to be transformed was within? This is the movement of karma in action. It pushes us inward, towards self-knowledge, forgiveness, and conscious love. And when the soul understands this, it finally understands that each Relationship is a mirror of its own inner journey. The weight of karma is only unbearable when we resist learning. But when we accept the role life has given us, when we look with love at the situation we find ourselves in, what seemed like a prison reveals itself to be a path to liberation. Emmanuel said, "God never places us in the wrong homes, only in the necessary ones." This phrase carries profound wisdom. The place where you are is exactly where your soul chose to evolve. And perhaps this is the greatest spiritual secret about karma. It's not here to punish you, but to prepare you. It's the invisible teacher who, however severe it may seem, only wants to see you graduate. And when the soul understands this, its outlook changes. What was once pain becomes opportunity. What was once anger becomes understanding. What was once a burden becomes a mission. Perhaps your greatest family challenge is actually your greatest opportunity for growth. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because if the spiritual journey within the family was already complex in past eras, today it presents itself with even more challenging layers. The modern world has brought us incredible advances, but also emotional distances. Selfishness disguised as individuality, and fragmented relationships. Emmanuel, through the messages psychographed by Chico Xavier, warns us that these family ruptures, so common today, are not flaws of fate, but powerful opportunities for transformation. The same spirit that sought to learn patience and forgiveness 100 years ago now needs to develop resilience in the face of screens that isolate us, routines that distance us, and conflicts that multiply in environments where love seems increasingly conditional. The first thing we need to understand is that Emmanuel's wisdom has not aged. On the contrary, it has become even more necessary. He reminds us that each member of the family is, in practice, a point of light or shadow that directly reflects on our own evolution, in a world where relationships are often limited to superficial interactions. Family life remains a unique laboratory, capable of testing our capacity for empathy, patience, and compassion. And the curious thing is that even when someone hurts us, this pain is a reflection of what needs to be transformed within us, not necessarily the other person. Today, many families live scattered, with homes that no longer share meaningful moments, and bonds that fray due to the lack of true presence. Emmanuel invites us to look at these situations through a different lens. A spiritual lens that reveals that physical distance does not diminish. The impact of spiritual connections, souls continue to interact, learn, provoke, and awaken lessons, even when they are not under the same roof. And it is precisely at this point that the modern mindset clashes with ancient wisdom. We have learned to value the visible, but we forget that the invisible behind the scenes, the intentions and feelings held in the heart, have a transformative power far greater than any public gesture. The hidden truth, which Emmanuel always sought to share, is that family healing is a collective process, not an individual one. When you transform your attitude, choose forgiveness, and exercise compassion, you're not just changing yourself, you're impacting the entire network of relationships around you. The modern world offers us many distractions, but it doesn't alter the spiritual laws that govern these soul-searching encounters. Every act of kindness, every gesture of patience, every decision to love without expecting anything in return, reverberates like waves that reach far beyond our reach. It's a silent dynamic, but one with a profound impact. Now, if we look behind the scenes of contemporary families, we see that many conflicts arise from the inability to recognize each person's spiritual role. Emmanuel teaches us that blood ties are also bonds of mission. A distant sibling can be there to teach us detachment, an absent father to teach us autonomy, a demanding mother to teach us the power of forgiveness. Every difficulty carries a revelation, every tension an opportunity for transformation. And understanding this changes the way you approach your decisions within the home. From the simplest to the most impactful, the impact of this understanding is not limited to the personal sphere. As the family evolves, it becomes a cell of transformation for society. Emmanuel saw the home as the first temple of spiritual awakening. And in times of widespread selfishness, this idea becomes more powerful than ever. A home where forgiveness, empathy, and compassion are practiced even imperfectly becomes a nucleus capable of radiating light and balance. And this is a silent but desperately needed revolution behind the scenes of the modern world. Where superficial connections often replace true bonds, Emmanuel's spirituality, therefore, offers us practical tools to navigate this scenario, looking beyond external behavior, understanding the role each person plays, accepting that imperfections are opportunities, and realizing that each act of conscious love creates lasting effects. He invites us to write family stories with awareness and presence, restoring bonds and transforming legacies that could otherwise perpetuate hurt for generations. And this wisdom doesn't just apply to traditional families. It also applies to families formed by choice, friends who become siblings, partners who take on collective responsibilities, and even those relationships that quickly blossom and dissolve. Each interaction is a chance for evolution, each reunion an opportunity to better understand what it means to love. Emmanuel reminds us that, in practice, family is any context in which the spirit meets another to learn, grow, and balance karma in today's world. The lesson is clear. Spirituality doesn't ask us to have perfect families. It doesn't demand constant harmony or ideal behavior. What Emmanuel suggests is much deeper and more liberating. Hearts willing to love, forgive, and transform, even with mistakes, failures, and stumbles. It's the intention that matters, the presence that heals, the awareness that transforms. Every small gesture counts. Every conscious decision resonates, and learning never ceases. Even amid modern chaos, the magic of this teaching lies in the realization that evolution is practical. Not theoretical. Spiritual philosophy is not learned from books or debates. It is learned from the gaze of another, from the response to a difficult gesture, from the daily choice to act with compassion, even when pride demands otherwise. Emmanuel, therefore, gives us not only a vision of purpose, but also a silent methodology for transformation. The home, with all its flaws, limitations, and challenges, becomes a classroom more powerful than any other environment. It is at this point that the reflection deepens even further, because we realize that each family challenge, each friction, each disagreement is a fundamental part of our spiritual journey, an opportunity to access hidden truths about ourselves and those we love. When we can see this way, everyday life ceases to be just routine and becomes a map of evolution, a silent guide that leads us through the most difficult experiences to reveal the essence of the soul. Awareness of this dimension connects us to the idea of real impact. When we shift our perspective, we shift the vibration of our home, and this shift reverberates beyond the home, touching friends, colleagues, neighbors, and eventually the entire energy field around us. Emmanuel reminds us that inner transformation always generates outer effects, and that the family is the most powerful starting point for this wave of evolution. And so, we realize that Emmanuel's wisdom is not just comfort in times of pain, but an invitation to conscious action, to the daily practice of love, patience, and forgiveness. It's not about perfection, but about progress. It's not about absolute harmony, but about aligned intention. It's the opportunity to experience spirituality tangibly. Impacting the world from your own home. Comment here. I'm on that journey too. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this reflection on family, karma, and spiritual evolution can change the way you view your own relationships. If this conversation resonated with you, how about joining this space for learning and growth? Subscribing to the channel is the best way to continue following these messages. Delve into new discoveries and access reflections that truly touch the soul. And take the opportunity to leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end." So I know this message got through correctly, and we also created a closer connection here, behind the scenes of learning. If you resonated with me, or noticed something you'd like to apply in your own life, give this video a like. It's a way to reinforce the positive energy we're building together, and it also helps more people discover these valuable insights. And look, There's a video right here that complements this very topic, offering new perspectives on spiritual signs within the family and the impact of our choices. Click and stay with me there, because the journey of understanding and transformation still has much more to reveal.